Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Wednesday webinar with Property Law Alliance. As always, it's so good to have you, our viewers, with us, and our experts as well, Bruno, Silna, and today's a pretty special day because we've got a guest with us, our first guest on our Wednesday webinar, Peter Mennen. Peter, how are you? Before I get to Bruno and Silna, how are you doing?
Freezing, is that an answer? I don't really know what to say other than that. But yeah, I'm sure everybody's pretty cold at the moment. The heaters are going at full steam in this house. But thank you very much. Very honored to be here tonight, and hopefully we can share some interesting and also obviously very relevant information.
Thanks, Peter. Bruno, how are you doing?
I'm warm. I've got about 2 heaters on, so I'm good. I was wearing a t-shirt earlier today in a meeting with Solna, so she can attest to that.
And Solna, briefly to you, you look like you're warm, so I think you're pretty fine, right?
I am not, Chris, and these guys just irritated me with their heater bragging. I currently have load shedding. So actually what you might not know is I sit with like a little camp light next to me, and this is the only reason you can see me. Because it's actually called, I do have a gas heater, but you guys bragging with your heaters, it's you who's taking the electricity, so we're stuck in load shedding. Sis julle. How are you, Chris? If you say you have a heater on, I'm out, I'm leaving.
No, I don't have to say that because as I say every week, I'm in Durban, man. We don't need heaters out here. Perfectly fine.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't know if that makes you feel worse or not, but nevertheless, that's where
I was in PE last week, Thursday and Friday, and I have to admit the weather there is amazing. It's incredible. It's like, yeah, it's like winter never hit.
My goodness.
It's usually dismal with the wind. As long as there's no wind, life is perfect.
Yeah.
I once did a roadshow with PayProp, and to get from the hotel to the airport and then from the car to the airplane, and I was wearing a dress. I was so nervous. It was the most, if I think about PE, I get extremely nervous.
So Peter, just to fill you in, for the first 3 minutes of every single show we have, we talk about the weather. And that's just to let our viewers know that they've actually tuned into the right webinar. Because if it's not about weather in the first 3 minutes, they're in the wrong place.
Well, I've got another one to share, saying that you're from Durban, or actually in Durban. I had a meeting with clients today, both wearing beanies. So I think that's a Durban thing rather than a cold thing. Hey.
That's a Durban thing. I'm from Johannesburg, so when I come out here, it's healing. But nevertheless, guys, it's so good to have all of you with us. And as we were mentioning earlier, to have Peter with us. And Peter, you are the head of legal at a company called TPN. And I mean, for those of us in the property sector, and I mean, from landlords to tenants to estate agents, attorneys, and all the rest, I mean, TPN has and continues to be a very integral part of our daily lives. But for those of us, or for people who may have been living under a rock for the last 20 odd years, what is TPN, or who is TPN, and what do you guys do?
Thank you for that very positive sell, Chris. So TPN is inherently a credit bureau. So yes, we're a company and we function in the rental and schools marketplace, or the industries, but we're a credit bureau at heart. And what that means is that we're a data collector. So some of you might know other credit bureaus in the country like TransUnion or Experian or CompuScan and all of those. And TPN is a niche market credit bureau in that we only function in 2 different industries, in the property sector as well as the schooling sector. We've got a unique set of data, our own database, whereby clients, landlords, individual estate agencies, bigger listed rates, all submit data into the bureau on a monthly basis, either manually or through their property management systems or data management systems. And as a result of that, we've got a very valuable database worth of information on how tenants as well as parents have paid school fees throughout the month. We keep that data on record for a period of 5 years, as we're allowed to in terms of the National Credit Act. And through the TPN service, we've obviously got a lot of different ad hoc services that we provide as well, including things like lease agreements, LeasePack documentation, which we'll probably speak about a little bit later. as well as being able to send through letters of demand, as well as load default listings or blacklistings through the Bureau itself. So predominantly we're a credit bureau, we're a data collector, but we do have ad hoc different services, and we service both the property as well as the schooling sectors.
Sure. Wow, man, that's a lot of stuff that you guys do. And obviously, like I was saying, it's pretty much something to have in your arsenal. I mean, we are in the property realm with property investors and a whole host of people watching us. So TPN definitely is something to hold and to keep in your arsenal if you are in this industry, well, in the sectors that you've mentioned as well. I don't want to waste too much time before I get to Silna, because Silna's got a question around evictions and some of the trends that she's seeing currently in the world that she's involved in. Silna, I just knew if you want to quickly jump into the question that you have for Peter.
Yes, definitely. I think, thanks, Chris. I think something important, Peter, to talk about, I do definitely want to talk about evictions, but I think if we don't, I'm sorry, Chris, I'm hijacking my own question. Did you see that? It's amazing.
I did.
But then at least you guys, I mean, I am the rose amongst the thorns. I am allowed to, dictate my own, questions as I like. Peter, I actually want to talk about your payment profile data and tenant payment behavior, because that's going to lead me to my eviction question I have for you. At least I warn you sort of in advance what I'm going to be on about. But I'm obviously very closely involved in agent training and things like that. So I do a lot of training around tenant vetting and the sort of data that people need to look at. And I am, because of the kind of data TPN has on payment behavior, which is unaffected by credit amnesties and stuff like that. Don't you maybe want to talk our viewers through that a little bit, please? Because that's a very valuable set of data that you guys have.
Thank you so much, Silna. That's actually a great question, because it sort of leads into what a credit bureau does. So there is a centralized database of information all across the country called SACRA, the South African Consumer Risk and Reporting Association. Now, what that data collector does is many of the banks, as well as the integral credit bureaus in the country, subscribe to that information. And what that basically is it's all credit information all across the country. So how you pay your loans, how you pay your credit card, how you pay your store accounts, how you basically pay any credit or service provider in the country. And that's a centralized database. What TPN does is, we're just going to talk about the rental market. We're not even talking about schools today. But we collect payment profile information from all of our clients. Now, what that basically is, it's how a tenant has paid each and every single month of their lease agreement, whether that's paid on time, within a grace period, paid late, partially paid, or did not pay for the entire month. And what that basically means, if I can just go into those indicators once again, is paid on time, and in full in terms of your lease agreement on or before the 1st. A grace period payment category is included as a result of us not necessarily knowing what the client's lease agreements state. So me and you have had this discussion many a time regarding paid on or before the 1st, or paid and cleared on or before the 1st. So we needed to bring in a grace period payment category, and that's basically up until the 7th of the month. Then we've got a paid late indicator that is from the 8th until the last day of the month. Partial payment, obviously only a percentage of the rental has been paid, and then a did not pay indicator as well. And what clients go and do, depending on what data management system they're utilizing, say, for example, they might be using a PayProp, or they might be using a different system that they're actually capturing information on. Even payroll systems or Sage systems actually integrate directly with TPN, is that data gets pushed through into the credit bureau. And as a result of that, the tenant's credit payment or profile, at least, gets affected either negatively or positively as a result of the payment. So this is a very important concept. I know we're going to get to evictions later as well, but there's no immediate repercussion for non-payment of rental. It's not as if you've got a Virgin Active account, you don't pay Virgin Active, they cancel your contract, and as a result, you're no longer able to go and train your biceps or into the gym. For rental payments specifically, there is no immediate repercussion. As we all know, there's a process to be followed. There's a legal process ranging from your letters of demand right through cancellation and eviction. Whereas if you're loading payment profiles onto TPN, you're affecting the tenant's credit payment or their profile each and every single month based on how they pay you. So that the next landlord or any estate agency that does a TPN credit report can actually see how the tenant has made previous or past rental payments. So it's a very valuable data set. And I always say that you know how a tenant is going to pay you now by how they've paid you in the past or how they've paid somebody else. So having a look at that credit payment profile, we obviously also provide clients when they perform credit checks with all other different data sets like Companies Act information, deeds office information. We even include the SACRA database so that you can see the debt ratios of what the tenant currently owes, other service providers, but we also provide you with that payment profile information and allow you to blacklist tenants directly through the system as well.
Sure.
That's fantastic.
Peter,
Yes, Bruno.
No, you can go.
No, you can go, Bruno.
Okay.
We're so excited to have a guest. Sorry, Peter, you're just going to have to answer us.
Go for it, guys, please.
So an interesting debate that I've had with a couple of practitioners, especially at a very academic level, but maybe you can just weigh in. The fact that, especially considering that a lot of the data collection is done in terms of the National Credit Act and the time periods and the regulations in terms thereof. And then we start looking at the fact that these are a rental collection. So we've had this argument with some of the commercial rental collections that we've done, where the tenants would effectively say, well, hold on, there is no credit agreement. Why would the National Credit Act actually apply? Why are we worried about this data being stored somewhere or reflecting on my credit profile when it really shouldn't, because it doesn't belong there?
That's a fantastic question. So obviously all of us know, the attorneys obviously on the session as well, that lease agreements don't form part of credit agreements in terms of the NCA. Regardless of that, we're entitled in terms of the regulations to collect rental payment profile information that is specifically included in terms of the National Credit Act on how accommodation has been paid, as well as how schooling or parents have paid school fees. So we're entitled to collect this information. We've been completely regulated by the National Credit Regulator, as well as receiving clean audits for the last 20 years on the database that we collect the information on. So regardless of it not being a credit agreement, you can allocate certain parts of the National Credit Act to how people collect rental payment profile information as well, in terms of, I believe it's section 164, but please don't quote me on this, as well as the regulations. So we're entitled to collect the information, and as I said, we're a registered credit bureau in terms of the National Credit Act as well.
Cool.
Thanks, Peter. Peter, I want to, you know what, I need to quickly apologize because I was stuttering and stammering, and Silma, you saved me because I was so excited the entire week. That was my question. I wanted to ask the question to Peter. What happened was, I think I'm being profiled by pizza stores, like pizza shops, because I just got like 5 pop-ups on my phone, blocked my entire screen, and I lost all train of thought, and I was like, oh goodness, and I threw it over to you. So thank you, Silma, for saving me there. And now I'm going to rightly so pass on to you for the question that you have.
This is probably where POPI is going to take effect. Those pizza stores trying to contact you.
I hope you ordered pizza, Chris, because this is such a pizza evening.
Well,
But
now
anyway,
he's going to.
He's definitely going to have to. Peter, okay, but now that we know that, and obviously tenant vetting is, you can never vet to a point where you're going to exclude evictions, because things change and situations change and stuff happens. But I love it if people do a full tenant vetting with previous landlord payment behavior, the whole thing. But what we are seeing, and as you know, the Property Law Alliance consists of 3 specialist eviction firms. And what we are seeing, all 3 of us, all 3 of our firms are seeing a major increase in the number of eviction instructions to our firm. And now it's it would be a very arrogant assumption to just assume we're getting more instructions, because, you know,
Rental payments have gone down.
I didn't say anything. I'm just saying, obviously, even between the three firms that's represented in the Property Law Alliance, if we see 5% of all the evictions in the country, I think it's a lot. But we are seeing a major increase. Is it just because we're the cool kids, or are there more evictions happening in South Africa at this stage? Be careful now.
Yes. So I'm going to talk about the data. I'm not going to talk about the evictions. Okay. So what you're currently busy seeing is most probably very correct, in that you're seeing more evictions all across the board, whether that be residential or commercial based. If we can head into the data, just the rental good standing or the good standing ratios. During, let's say, the last quarter of the year, from a residential sector, we had around about a good standing ratio of 77.5%. So what that means is that tenants who pay on time within a grace period or paid late, but you're getting your rental on or before the last day of the month. So we saw that good standing ratio reach around about 77.5%. Obviously, during the pandemic period, there was a big deterioration in rental payments across the country, whereas currently in Q1, we've actually seen a little bit of an increase in the good standing payments. Regardless of that, the vacancies have obviously increased into the first quarter. They have increased by only around about 0.5%. As well as specifically the tenants that have been allocated into the did not payment category. So the bad tenants, those that you at the end of the day need to evict, or Bruno needs to evict, they have increased across the country. So even though the good standing ratios have gone up, the number of tenants in actual default that have not paid rental has most certainly increased. From an eviction standpoint, you can answer that question. They have most probably increased as a result. I don't know if that is necessarily only as a result of the courts probably functioning better, perhaps, that more people are inclined to follow eviction processes, or that with the lockdown restrictions and everything that we had with the changes in legislation and the unfair practice regulations and everything surrounding the lockdown and pandemic period, perhaps as a result of that opening up and there being a little bit more leeway, the eviction instructions have possibly increased. But the good standing ratios are actually increasing for Q1, as we've seen that across the board.
That's fantastic news, though, if we already see a bit of a recovery in that. But now I will keep quiet. Thank you, Chris, for letting me have 2 questions.
No.
You want a third one, so go for
it. So out of interest, Peter, now that we're looking at like vacancy rates, is the fact that people have a negative credit profile now impacting who people allow on as tenants? I mean, because I'm obviously going to ask you to explain to everyone what the difference is between a default listing and a judgment listing, how long they actually get stored, and how one can actually go about removing it. But just maybe to start off, is the fact that people are coming in with negative listings impacting the vacancy rates and like the stats that you guys have?
Bruno, just having a look at the entire market and not just necessarily the rental market per se, I believe it's not just as a result of bad payment profile records, because there's, like I said, the good standing ratios have gone up. What I believe it's as a result of is that more people are buying property, and that's what we're seeing also. As a result of the interest rates decreasing, there are more people that are opting for purchasing property rather than renting. And I'm sure all of us that are in Johannesburg, sorry, Chris, but you've seen all these developments go up as well. There is a mass amount of developments going up, and specifically in a certain price bracket. We always call the 7,000 to 12,000 Rand the sweet spot for rentals from a good standing ratio record, because that's the highest good standing that you have all across the board. If you're moving up or moving down from that, there are definitely decreases. But I think it's as a result of more people consolidating, number one, moving back in with parents because they can't afford to pay rental as a result of loss of jobs. perhaps a reduction in their salaries. And we saw that also with these tenant surveys that we sent out from TPN, is that there were multiple tenants that actually moved back in with family, with friends, as a result of the economic situation in the country at the moment. But I also think it goes in hand with more people purchasing properties as a result of the interest rates getting lower. So I don't necessarily think people submitting payment profile records is going to affect vacancy ratios. I think it's more as a result of the entire economy at the moment, looking at it holistically.
Fair enough. I suppose then a point that just needs to be mentioned, it's not really a question, but I think Solna and I mentioned this as a concern at some point, is interest rates being low now it has no indication on what they're going to look like in a couple of years. And this trend in itself is a huge issue, where like 2-3 years time, we're going to expect a mass like flooding of the market on properties in execution or distressed properties, because interest rates shoot up, people all of a sudden can't pay bonds, and the market's going to turn. But sorry, in any case, that's just a comment. I don't know if you want to...
Brilliant comment, Bruno.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I'm in 100% agreement with you as well.
Sure.
I think it's purely because more people are purchasing properties or the interest rates are higher, it doesn't, let's call it, solve all the problems whatsoever. I mean, it inherently creates problems because credit's credit at the end of the day. And yes, it's fantastic to be able to purchase a property, but it's still on loan. You still need to repay that. And if something were to happen, whether that be a South African economic situation where the interest rates do increase as a result of that, you are definitely going to see that in the marketplace.
Sure. So maybe just off the back of the previous question, do you want to explain to everyone what the difference between a default listing and a judgment listing is?
Great, let's go straight into that. Okay, so there are two companies in South Africa that collect judgment information. So for all of those viewers out there who have probably performed a credit check, whether it be a TPN, a TransUnion, Experian, it doesn't necessarily matter. You're going to be seeing judgment information on that credit check. So judgment information is specifically captured only by those two companies in the country that go around to the courts and collect all the court documentation, and they go and load that information directly onto the person's credit profile, whereas the credit bureaus go and buy that information and load it on. A blacklisting or a default, and we don't really use the term blacklisting, it's a colloquial term we use for loading of a default in terms of the National Credit Act. That record only stays on for 12 months, plus there's a procedural step that you need to follow in that the tenant, the consumer, the person who's taken out credit needs to be 3 consecutive billing cycles in arrears, which means that they either have made non-payments or partial payments for consecutively 3 months, plus a 20 business day letter of demand must have been sent out that indicates that the tenant, consumer, other person, their credit profile is going to be negatively affected as a result of their non-payment on that LOD. So you can stipulate that they're going to be blacklisted as a result if they don't pay, but there's procedural steps to take place prior to you loading an actual default listing as well. Whereas judgments is court records, default listings are loaded directly onto a credit bureau. So you can do that through all of the credit bureaus, whether that be TransUnion, Experian, all the others, or ourselves. We specifically only load defaults for the market sectors that we delve into.
Sure. Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Victor.
Bruno, just one quick segue on that, if you wouldn't mind. Whereas I said default information is loaded for 12 months, payment profile information can actually be kept on a person's profile for a period of 5 years. So it's a lot longer that you can hold the payment profile information, but the default information only 12 months. And also, should a person pay, it should be taken off automatically. We've actually got a disputes process in terms of the National Credit Act that we need to follow as TPN. There's an investigation that happens should a person dispute the information on their credit profile. That takes 20 business days to do. And if we don't receive information back from the person who's loaded it, or we receive information that shows that the information was incorrectly loaded based on either procedural steps or just on the matter itself, we actually go and remove that listing. So there are major differences between a judgment and a default on a bureau.
So the positions changed quite a bit, because I mean, I still remember on the days that I used to article, where as soon as you did a default, it was virtually impossible to remove it. It stayed on for a period of 3 years. And if you paid, they just endorsed it and said paid in full, but it stayed there as something that had happened in the past. So what you're saying now is a person can rectify this by making a payment late, and they'll remove the default listing as soon as it's paid.
100% correct. So as soon as that default has been paid, it can be removed. And also if the default's been incorrectly loaded, it is removed by the credit bureau on obviously complaint or dispute by the consumer who's disputed that information. So the disputes, or rather the blacklisting process, or the loading of the default process, was actually quite easy a while back. You could basically just go and load a blacklisting, whereas now you've got the procedural steps of the 3 months in arrears, as well as the letter of command that needs to go out. So things have changed considerably in the credit marketplace as a result.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter.
Pleasure, Bruno.
Thank you. Peter, I wanted to find out from you. So TPN offers lease packs and sale packs and so forth. And I just wanted to find out from you some information around those products and offerings that you guys have. And then secondly, now with POPI in mind, do lease agreements, need to be updated in light thereof, of recent changes or anything of that sort?
Thanks for the question, Chris. So TPN currently has, let me count, 4 different packs available to clients. They don't need to be TPN clients themselves. They can purchase these directly from the TPN shop. We've got a HR employment pack available that's drafted by Fullard Mayer Morrison. The actual drafting attorney there is an acting judge in the Labour Court, so he really knows what he's doing with his employment. But the packs sort of all follow a similar standardization. The packs are available, the residential as well as HR, for 920 Rand, including VAT per year. So it's a very inexpensive pack to go and utilize. We've got a commercial lease pack available as well. All these packs are available in PDF as well as Word. Then we've got a residential lease pack as well as a sales pack available directly through the TPN shop. These documents, Silna, if I may say, drafted from the residential side as well as the sales side by Silna and her team at SSLR Incorporated. They are updated, Silna, you can say every 3 months or so, depending on any legislation changes or things that have happened in court. If something has happened in court, then we go and update these lease agreements as well. Taking into consideration POPI, yes, most certainly. Your application forms, mandates, as well as lease agreements are going to need to contain consent provisions, even though in terms of Section 11 of POPI, let's not call them exclusions, but it's when consent is required and when a responsible party may actually process personal information from a data subject. One of the, let's call it inclusions over there, is if the data subject has consented to the information being processed. So I think it's very important that consent provisions be included into the lease agreements, mandates, and application forms. Regardless, in terms of Section 11, there is actually, let's call it an exclusion here, is that if it is necessary for the proper fulfillment or the enactment of an agreement, then you may process the personal information as well. But in terms of your lease agreements, your mandates and application forms all across the board, including actually your employment contracts, which is incredibly important because a lot of personal information is being shared from that front as well. So I'm sure we've got some estate agents listening here tonight. Your contracts, whether they be lease agreements or your employment agreements, your code of conduct, needs to be updated with relevant provisions, because whether you are processing the personal information of employees or you're processing the personal information of tenants or landlords, sort of all falls into the same category. It's still processing personal information that a person should consent to. So yes, in terms of the TP and lease agreements, sale agreements, the commercial leaseback and HR documents, we've got a regulatory compliance clause built into the documentation that deals with not just submitting data into the credit bureau. And this is perhaps something to note that Bruno also asked earlier. regarding submitting information into the Bureau. There's actually a regulatory compliance provision built into this as well. Should consent need to be garnered from the actual tenant or from the landlord. But this regulatory compliance provision has been updated with the relevant POPI provisions to ensure that both parties are compliant with the data protection legislation. And as we all know, POPI is going to be implemented from the 1st of July, but we sort of had this provision hanging over our heads from the European Union regarding the GDPR as of for quite some time. So banking on that and having a look at regulatory compliance, yes, lease agreements do need to change, application forms need to change, mandates need to change, just so that you ensure as an estate agent who is processing that personal information that you have garnered that consent.
Yeah, thanks so much, Peter. This is invaluable information that you provided to us. We are at that portion of the show where we are going to call it an end, but you're our first guest, man, and I'm just so excited to have, no offense to Silva, no offense to Bruno, but I'm tired of seeing you guys all the time. It's so, man, look at this guy's suit. Look at that. What a well-dressed guy. But
may I make the jokes of perhaps I'm dressed very well upstairs and not so well downstairs because we're all from home.
Are you wearing pajamas, Peter?
Still, no, I'm not going to say.
I'm just saying, I feel this is unfair, Chris, because I'm usually the only blonde on the webinar, and I think Peter is just stealing my thunder now. So this is Peter, but we'll invite you back. Apologize. Because I think for the value that you've added for the viewers, I'm cool with not being the only blonde on the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you so much. Just as a sort of a final word just on that from me, if should people wish to contact TPN, you're more than welcome to obviously contact us directly. I think you can share the contact information directly with the group if you'd like. From our front, obviously, whether you're going to be a TPN client accessing the credit bureau system from a data perspective, whether you're a state agency or just looking at lease agreements through the TPN shop, and perhaps even just looking at property reports, investor reports, deed searches, all of that, those are obviously also available. So please feel free to contact us. We do like to work late. So you guys are more than welcome to bother us with that as well. Would actually see it as an honor to be able to help your clients as well through the process, because I know things are not so easy at the moment out there. So let's see what we can do.
Sure.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in and for spending this Wednesday afternoon or rather evening with us. It's always good to have you with us, and it's always good to see Silva. I feel bad. I'm excited to see you guys. Peter, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Yeah, thank you so much for that information that you've given to us and to the viewers as well. I know that it's really invaluable information and something that, like I said earlier, is add to the arsenal that us in the property sector use, but also you mentioned schools and a whole host of other sectors. So thank you for that. And thank you to our viewers. Please tune in next week, Wednesday at 6 o'clock. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments and on the group, as we always mention, and we definitely will get through to your questions. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. See you next time. Cheers.
Cool.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.